Hi, I'm Pastor Kurt, and this is your 5-minute Bible study. Today, we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 1, verses 9 through 11. This is the story of Jesus' baptism in the Gospel of Mark, but it's only 3 verses long. As I mentioned in the last video, this Gospel writer moves things along really fast. The favorite word in this Gospel is immediately. Immediately this happened, immediately that happened. Things are moving along at a quick pace, and that includes Jesus' baptism. We don't get any description about any conversation between Jesus and John. It's basically just Jesus was baptized, let's move on to the next thing. Almost just a matter of fact that it happened. But the thing I want us to pay attention to here is the very last line in this scene. This is when the divine voice speaks over Jesus and says, "You are my son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." Now, for us, we often just take that for granted, right? Of course, God was well pleased with Jesus. He's Jesus, right? Well, this is important. Remember, the Gospel of Mark doesn't have any kind of birth story about Jesus. It just gets going right away with the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ. We hear about John the Baptist, Jesus' baptism, and then we're off. But this is important because right before Jesus' ministry, he hears this affirmation of who he is. Not much has happened before this. I mean, yes, Jesus has lived before this. He's about 30 years old or so at this point. But in the narrative, in the gospel, not much has happened. And that's kind of important for us to think about. Because when we think of baptism today, a lot of times we think about the baptism of babies. Not much has happened in their lives at that point. Maybe they're just a few days old, maybe a few weeks old, right? Not a whole lot has happened. But in baptism, we still celebrate that they are God's beloved children, and with them God is well pleased. It is then, from that baptism moment, that they are then launched out to share God's love with others, very much like how it happens here in the Gospel of Mark with Jesus. He hears that divine announcement, "You are my son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." And that then propels him out to share God's love with others. Also, notice that this divine announcement of identity is not connected to anything that has happened before. It's not connected to anything that Jesus has done up to this point. Because in the narrative, Jesus hasn't done anything. This is really his first appearance on the stage in the Gospel of Mark. When we think about baptism, remember that divine promise is given to you, and it's not based on anything you've done either. This is part of the beauty of baptism, that God says, "You are my beloved child. With you I am well pleased." That is based upon God's love for you, not upon anything you've done. It's not based on any action you've done, any choice you've made, anything like that. It's simply based on God's love for you. In baptism, God claims you. God says, "You are mine." And because we have that identity, because God has claimed us, because God gives us new life, that then launches us out to share God's love with others too. So even though this section here in the Gospel of Mark is only 3 verses long, this baptism scene of Jesus reminds us that we are God's beloved children. You are God's beloved child. And because of baptism, we are claimed and we are then sent out to share God's love with others. There's your 5-minute Bible study for the day. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. and I'll see you next time. Thanks.